in this particular theme, what we're looking at is religion and beliefs. This is religion and belief in Palolo. By this we're including both sides of Wailea Avenue, obviously. But I actually used to live in Wyoming Road, and when I was there was when, as Turanian's 1993 book on or pamphlet on Palolo points out, a very controversial Korean Buddhist temple was built in the back on Wyoming, which caused a huge amount of row at the time. I think it's pretty much been integrated now. I don't remember seeing anything recently about about that particular place. Now, if you go to their website, you don't see anything. But what that does is that brings up a really interesting factor about Palolo, is there's actually a really large number of religious institutions in the valley. And I don't know that anyone's ever, I don't know that anyone's looked anywhere in Honolulu or in the Hawaiian Islands at all. What are the actual patterns of religious practices in Palolo and how those changed over time? And we know, for example, on this campus down at the rifle range, there was a heiau, there was an agricultural heiau back in the pre-1820 period, whose function was to sort of manage and oversee this area of the island, especially Palolo in terms of agricultural functions. There's some hint that maybe Ma'uamai was somehow another ritual site, but I'm not really too sure what that's about. And there's, of course, the hugely important ones down in Waikiki. So some of this would actually go back, are there, and as far as I know, I've never seen anything else, are there actually other discussions about pre-Christian ritual sites in this particular part of the island? By that, I would include Kaimoki as well as Palolo, and of course, both the Wilhelmina Monolani Heights site on that side and then St. Louis Heights on the other. So it'd be sort of a larger expanse. There is very likely probably material in the Hawaiian newspapers, the Hawaiian language newspapers. That, of course, requires that you be able to read fairly comprehensively Hawaiian. And that would also be rather tricky because figuring out how you're going to search all those newspapers for you can't read them. So you have to actually figure out some sort of search patterns that would actually do it. And I think Palolo would work in terms of a term, but you have to be Hawaiian competent. So if we can do that, that's fine. But I'm not sure how many of you guys are Hawaiian competent to want to do this particular research thing. So we're sort of assuming for now we might not find that might be something we do in the future. I should point out St. Louis is also going to be working on this project, and there might be someone at St. Louis that wants to take that part of the project on. What we're looking at specifically would be in the historic period. First task would be what religious structures and religious practices and beliefs practices have been taken place in the last 200 years in Palolo, since basically 1820s, 1830s. And that's because we have in-print resources from the 1830s. So that, and they would talk about maybe the period 20 years before. So we have stuff we can look for since roughly about 1820 on. Where were these places? When were they in use? What groups and what belief systems did they reflect? In other words, what were they used for? And what did those groups see their function as being? And how have which ones have disappeared or modified themselves, and which ones have shown up? How have these patterns changed over time? The Hongwon-ji, for example, in the middle of the valley, I know from a little work I did, didn't show up here until the 1960s because they actually used to be down, I think, on part of Old Waialae on the edge of Moe'ilina-Makole near where university is. But they had to leave there when the freeway was put in, so they then rebuilt themselves in Palolo, so they're relatively recent. As I mentioned earlier, that Korean Buddhist temple in the back of Waiamau dates from the 1980s or 1990s, 1980s, I think, I don't know, that's when I was there. So that's really recent, and Korean community isn't in Palolo. The Korean community is more downtown, say Keamoku area. So what religious institutions are here? Why are they here? Just back of that, there's a Zen Buddhist meditation sort of complex that's been there for apparently a fairly long amount of time. So, I don't have no idea what's all in the valley, what type of different Christian denominations are here. And that would also include not only, the religions, but also stuff that people are doing in their homes. In some religions, with Southern Baptists and groups like that, you might have homes that are actually also religious institutions where people meet for religious purposes. So we're not only talking mainstream religious structures, we're doing anything that people do that's religiously based, that they've done in the valley, that they're doing in the valley. I would suspect that the English language newspapers in the 20th century, I'm not too sure, but I sort of vaguely remember that if you went into certain sections, especially on Sunday, or Saturday maybe, they would actually have a list of the places that had religious services. So that might be an easy way to tag, for example, your Christian stuff. And I'm not sure if that would include, Buddhist and other types of religions. So there might be a fair amount of stuff in the newspapers. This would probably also involve contacting the different religious institutions that are existing in the valley now, and getting from them directly. How long have they been here? Where did they come from? How do they use their religious structures here? What purpose do they serve? What belief system do they represent, etc.? So this is actually a fairly all-encompassing study, but we're also trying to look at where these places are. Is there some pattern, for example, of religious institutions? Are they found in parts of Palolo and not in others? And again, we don't know. We haven't looked at this yet. Second task would be looking at the less formal belief systems. These would include, for example, are there meditation groups here? Bible study groups might be another example of this. This might be much more difficult to find. I suspect a lot of this would probably show up only in newspaper advertisements, or maybe very short one-paragraph notices in newspapers. So again, this might involve using Palolo or Pukele or Waimau or Wilhelmina Rise or something like that as actually your title in a search engine and seeing everything that pops up. So this is going to be a little trickier because I'm not sure how much this was ever in print. But we also, among other things, would be interested in what's going on now. So using contemporary social media, for example, I suspect maybe Craigslist might actually be a good source in terms of if you're looking for a particular meditation group or something like that. How do you find that in Palolo in 2020? I don't know. Maybe some of our religion folks here would have some idea, or maybe the librarians would. But we want to actually know how religion and belief are being practiced as we speak here in 2020. So that would be sort of task 2. This also would involve, the fact that we have 3 major Catholic institutions within a couple of blocks of each other. The brothers moved here in 1926-27 and set up St. Louis campus. I'm not sure when Sacred Hearts arrives. I'm sure it's easily available. There's probably someone there I can tell you. And then you've got St. Patrick's right next to them. So I'm not sure why you've got 3 Catholic institutions basically in a block and a half of each other. But then finding out what that's about. Because the combination of those 3 places is not only a lot of property, but of course, since the Marianists actually bought St. Louis Heights originally, not just where they are now, they were probably the biggest, if not one of the biggest, if not the biggest landowner in this part of the area. So why did the Catholic Church find Palolo such a fascinating place to be versus, say, in Moedi and Macaulay, or down further in Waialae, Kahala, or Kaimoki or something like that? Why here? So that's typical of the type of things we want to look at in these 2 particular themes, or I should say in these 2 tasks in this particular theme. So it's an interesting area of research. Like the other ones, it's going to involve a fair amount of what you would classically call sort of classic detective archival research. Going and finding where this stuff is, asking people, looking at accounts, especially newspaper accounts in the last couple of 100 years, about the things that were going on, because that stuff is obviously there. You can see it in Google Earth. People do it, but I don't know that anyone's ever actually looked at it. We want to try to map it and figure out what it's all about. So that's this particular theme. A very interesting and very, very different way to look at religion by tying religion to place.